Spire Motorsports co-owner Jeff Dickerson responds to the Joe Gibbs Racing lawsuit, and it includes a potential trade between Joe Gibbs Racing and Spire Motorsports. Who knew that was going to be on the table? He also talks about how JGR allegedly tries to steal other team sponsors and reiterates they don't need Joe Gibbs Racing's trade secrets. We'll also talk about the Days of Thunder sequel because apparently there's a writer attached to the project now. Fox refuses to stop using AI in their promos, and their latest one for Las Vegas is really, really bad. And I forgot about one potential big change in silly season. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. So yesterday when I was talking about NASCAR silly season, I went through all the open rides that are available where I think people are going to potentially end up at. And I didn't talk about one of the biggest changes in silly season if it happens, mainly because I'm not entirely sold on it happening yet, but it was mentioned a few times, so let's talk about it. That is Kaulig Racing and the potential addition of Dodge to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2027. Now, obviously, if Dodge comes in, that's a new OEM. That would allow Kaulig Racing to receive another charter from NASCAR, who has 4 in reserves for a new OEM that comes into the sport, and that could potentially open up a new seat, or hey, maybe they do a complete overhaul and get rid of Ty Dillon. I don't think you would get rid of AJ Allmendinger, but if you did, there's another seat. Who could they possibly get there? I see people throwing around Kyle Busch's name for it, and logically, yeah, I understand the thought process there because in a sense, it does make sense. Bringing him in is a big name attached to this new project. Obviously, they've been out of the Cup Series since the end of the 2012 season, so they want to make a splash when they come back in, and Kyle Busch is a household name. At least he's a recognizable name to just the casuals to go along with it, and he would certainly bring attention to that project. Now, I think you would hold on to AJ Allmendinger. AJ, one of the best race car drivers out there, gives great technical feedback, really, really strong driver across multiple different types of racetrack. I think the Ty Dillon seat would very much be open in that sense to potentially bring somebody else in for it. Who would you get? Would you bring somebody up? Would you try to, poach somebody else that could potentially be in play for silly season? I think that's probably the biggest question mark around silly season is if they're going to be able to make it. They obviously have said that they have aspirations of making it to the 2027 Daytona 500. I'm not entirely sold that they're going to get everything done in time. As far as I know, and I feel like we would have heard this by now, is I don't think they've submitted a body for 27 yet. And we're approaching the time where you're really going to have to turn that in because you have a number of single source supplied parts and partners of NASCAR that are going to need to start making said parts. So if that doesn't happen soon, like real soon, I just don't see how that's going to happen by 2027 for the Daytona 500. I think it's more of a realistic 2028 project at this point, but in the off chance that they do pull it all together, I'm curious to see who they go out there and get, because I'm not saying that Kaulig's not a good team. I think they have a good team structure there. I think they have the resources. I think being, obviously tier 1 for the OEM is certainly where drivers want to be. It comes down to, do you want to be there for year number 1? The Cup Series is wildly competitive. They have to find an engine, which I've heard they've already figured that portion out. Then you have to just go through the entire setup, build up of the team, and redoing things in a sense there. Obviously, they have the infrastructure for a cup teams already laid out there. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a struggle in year number 1, unless, of course, NASCAR kind of helps them out the way they did in 2001 when they came back. But that's a topic for a different day. I just think that, maybe that might be the biggest story of silly season. I'm just not sold on it happening yet. On Wednesday night, Spire Motorsports co-owner Jeff Dickerson filed a response to the Joe Gibbs Racing lawsuit, and in there, the 22-page document, he said a lot of things. I'm not going to go through all 22 pages. If you want to, I believe Matt Weaver over at Motorsport linked the scribed files within his article. I urge you to go read his article because he does a really fantastic job of talking about everything that's in there. I'm only going to touch on some of the highlights here because Jeff not happy about this. He's not happy that they're even in this situation. He's not happy that Joe Gibbs Racing decided to go the litigation route. Welcome to America. Then he's not happy about the things that are being said about not only Chris Gabehart, but about his team to go along with it. And in there, we learned a number of different things. And last year, when Rodney Childers was dismissed from Spire Motorsports after a few races as a crew chief of the 7 car, Cheddar Smith had followed him over from Stewart Haas Racing in that number 4 car of Josh Berry. Cheddar followed him over to the 7 car last year at Spire Motorsports, Robert Cheddar Smith. Well, he was also granted a release last year, and he ended up over at the 54 car of Ty Gibbs to be the crew chief on the 54 car. And at the time, it was like, oh, wow, like, obviously he had just signed a new deal with Spire. I assume that, without Rodney there, he probably didn't want to be there either. So go look for a different opportunity. And I just figured Spire had just released him from his contract because they're like, hey, man, if you don't want to be here, like, obviously the guy that you came with is not here. So yeah, we'll just let you go. Kind of a good faith type of thing. Well, we learned that Dickerson and Joe Gibbs Racing, Spire Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing, had essentially agreed to a trade of sorts where they would release Robert Cheddar Smith out of his contract early so he could go to Joe Gibbs Racing. And then basically Spire Motorsports would receive an employee back to be named later. And if they didn't receive an employee, they would get $100,000 from Joe Gibbs Racing. Not a bad deal all around there. So, as the year went on last year in 2025, Spire Motorsports reached back out to Joe Gibbs Racing. They said, hey, we'll take Tyler Allen. Tyler Allen, crew chief of the number 54 car, and then he was basically replaced with Chris Gabehart for 9 races. Spire reached out and said, hey, we'll take Tyler Allen in exchange for Cheddar Smith. You're not using him. We can use him over here. Joe Gibbs Racing said, no, we're not going to give you Tyler Allen, which part of me can understand that, right? Like if we're talking about equal trade for trade here, like you gave a car chief, you're not going to get a crew chief back in return. Now I can understand that a little bit there. So then they also reached back out and to see if they could get the car chief that Cheddar Smith essentially replaced over at Joe Gibbs Racing. And once again, we're subsequently told, no, you're not going to get him there. So they didn't get anybody in return and they didn't get any money back. And they did all of this just with the understanding that this would happen. And yeah, it ended up not happening there. So yeah, technically trades still aren't a thing in NASCAR for the most part, but it was interesting to kind of see how that was all, laid out there. Dickerson also gets into the private investigator that Joe Gibbs Racing hired to tail he and Chris Gabehart around, to which Carson Hocevar said, you didn't need a private investigator to find out where they're eating lunch at. You could have just walked around the corner and seen them because apparently that this restaurant called Barcelona's, Dickerson's there like multiple times a week, and it's right next to the Toyota GR shop, the Toyota Gazoo Racing shop. So it's not like it's a super big secret. And as Dickerson mentioned in his response, didn't feel the need to be sneaky about it because at that point, Gabehart wasn't employed by Joe Gibbs Racing any longer, wasn't receiving money from Joe Gibbs Racing. It was just two friends who have known each other for 16 years having lunch together. Not anything crazy by any means, but he said he was disturbed to learn that Joe Gibbs Racing had hired a private investigator to spy on him and a former Joe Gibbs Racing employee. And he really emphasized the former part there because, well, Gabehart was a former employee at that point. He also goes on to say that he's been in NASCAR for 25 years and not once has he ever heard of a team going to this extent of hiring a private investigator to tail them around, to which I would agree with him. I think that might have been a little bit excessive there. Dickerson also goes on to reiterate that they don't need Joe Gibbs Racing's trade secrets. They don't need Joe Gibbs Racing's information and their data because they have a technical alliance with Hendrick Motorsports. And as he mentions, Hendrick has more wins and more championships than Joe Gibbs Racing, including winning the championship last year in 2025. And they don't drive Toyotas, so they don't need their information. Now, obviously, with the car the way it is, being a spec race car, you can make an argument that having the data would certainly help out there. Then he went after Joe Gibbs Racing for allegedly trying to steal sponsors. And Dickerson says, quote, JGR frequently pursues sponsors who it knows are already under contract with other teams. In fact, just this past weekend, JGR was openly pursuing a sponsor who currently sponsors a different team in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. If JGR obtains that sponsor and gets that sponsor to move to JGR, it will present an existential threat for that team. As an example, I'm aware that JGR called one of Spire's anchor sponsors within the last year and offered to match what the sponsor was paying to Spire or to allow them to pay less if they chose to sponsor JGR. Ultimately, that sponsor chose to remain with Spire. Now, this isn't a secret, right? Within the garage, within the sport, it's known that this has happened in the past. It's also known that other teams do this. Like, this is not out of the realm of things that happen on a weekly basis. Like, there are teams out there that are calling other team sponsors on a weekly basis, trying to convince them to come over to that team. I mean, you see sponsors move around all the time. There's a reason King's Hawaiian is now over at Joe Gibbs Racing and it was at RFK Racing. people make phone calls, sponsors jump around. Like it happens. Openly pursuing a sponsor is a different story. And like, yeah, there's a bit of a gentleman's agreement, right? Like, hey, it is what it is, but also it's business and this sport is wildly cutthroat and super competitive. So it's going to happen. But I appreciate Dickerson just going all out in his response. So now we'll wait and see how all this is going to play out into the next couple of weeks here. But yeah, there's no love lost between Joe Gibbs Racing and Spire Motorsports. We'll see, which one makes it to victory lane first this year. I would imagine Joe Gibbs Racing is going to. But regardless, yeah, things are fiery out there. It really sounds like a Days of Thunder sequel is going to happen. A writer is now attached to the project and has been talking to teams and to drivers as they get ready to put together a story and a script for a sequel to Days of Thunder. Now, Days of Thunder was released in 1990, so we're looking at 36 years ago come this summer that this movie was released. And listen, it's a cult classic. NASCAR fans love to reference it. Is it, super realistic? Nah, not necessarily, but it's Hollywood, right? Like, it's like the Formula One movie, just with a different story. Now, with what they're going to do for the sequel, I'm just hoping that we don't get the same story that we got in Driven. Sorry, I meant the Formula One movie, where Cole Trickle comes out of retirement because they need the wily old veteran to come in and help tame the young gun who has championship potential, like a Carson Hocevar in this situation. And then that's what the entire movie's built around. Yeah, the Formula One movie is very much just a straight ripoff of Driven, just without the humming and maybe the same love interest or whatever goes into it. But conceptually, same thing. We don't need a NASCAR version of that. Yeah, sure, bring Cole Trickle back, right, with Tom Cruise. Have him be the veteran, or have him be the team owner now, or something along those lines. But obviously you have to include the original story into the new story over here, or else it would just be kind of pointless to do it. I just don't want to see the same movie that we've seen with Driven and with Formula One. Like, just give me something better than that. There's got to be a better creative idea out there than what we have there. And hey, in typical NASCAR style, maybe it's a nepotism movie where you have Cole Trickle's son and Rowdy Burns' son or something along those lines, and they can all get together and have a race amongst the kids out here, and the dads can be in the grandstand or something along those lines. I think there's a lot of possibilities for this movie. I am hopeful that they do make a movie because NASCAR being put back on the big screens, being put back in front of an audience like that is only going to help out with the popularity of the sport. And I think the sport should continue to grow. It's slowly clawing back. It's never getting back to its heyday when it was its most popular, when they had, 20 million people tuning in to watch the Daytona 500. That's going to be a stretch. But there's no reason that the sport can't get back to that 5 to 7 million viewer range for races on network. On network, cable's a different story, obviously, and make it a little bit more popular again. And this would certainly help out with that. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with it. Obviously, if they're just now writing it, like, we're not looking at a movie until 2030 at this point, or 2029 at the earliest. But yeah, it will be interesting to see sort of the direction that they take with it. And I think everybody should be happy about it because, again, a NASCAR movie is not a bad thing. Fox is addicted to using AI the same way your uncle's addicted to posting AI photos to Facebook and thinks that they're real. The latest promotion that Fox put out for the Las Vegas race coming up this Sunday on FS1 includes the 45 car. You would assume is Tyler Reddick, but it's also not a Gen 7 car. It's not a Gen 6 car, not even a Gen 5 car, not a Gen 4 car. It's kind of a combination of all of them, as if there was just inbreeding for multiple generations and you get some sort of mongoloid over here. And that's kind of what this car looks like. We've got a Monster Energy 45 car with a Gen 6, Gen 5 splitter on the front. But then while it's doing its burnout, we also notice that it has a wing on the back. Not a wing like we have with the Gen 5 car, but a wing nonetheless. And then it also has illuminated taillights because, yeah, that's something that makes total sense. And it's also got the steering rack that a drift car would have as it's doing burnouts here. Well, my question is, why are you using an AI video for the promotion for a race when you have 25 years worth of video content from Las Vegas? Because you've been doing the races from there for so long. How in the world do you create a promo of AI when you have decades worth of video sitting there for you to use? Decades of video that you shot. Makes no sense to me. It's absolutely mind-boggling how just blatantly dumb this is. How cheap it is. How pathetic it is. It is not that hard to just go grab somebody doing a burnout from last year, the year before that. I don't really care when. Throw it together and then be like, hey, Las Vegas, Pennzoil 400 this weekend, FS1 Sunday at 2:30, which isn't at 2:30. It's probably like 3:12. I don't actually know the green flag time, so don't tune in at 2:30. You're not going to see the start of the race at that time. Always aim for about 45 minutes after. But what are we doing here? It's not even the right racetrack or the grandstands or anything. None of this is correct. It's just, it sucks to see. If you're going to use AI, right, it's a necessary evil right now. If you're going to use it, at least use it correctly. Don't use it in this way. Not in a way that's so blatantly bad that everybody can immediately be like, yeah, that's not right. That actually looks pretty bad. All things considered. Yeah, I just watched it again. It's so bad. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about Dodge potentially coming into the series in 2027 and what that would mean for silly season. Get into the Jeff Dickerson comments that he made about the Joe Gibbs Racing lawsuit. And then we, of course, have the Days of Thunder sequel, and then Fox using AI just really, really poorly. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.